This is a video I wanted to do for quite a while, and well, probably a couple of years now. I just never gotten around to it. One of the biggest, I think, I'll call it misconceptions, at the same time, concerns maybe would be the correct word, is the frames on garden tractors. So what I've done is I have 4 frames in front of me, and we'll talk about each one as we get to it, and kind of some of the things that people say about frames. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start down here on these 2 on the end. What we have is this is a 318 frame, and this is a 420 frame. So we're talking about the basically, early 80s for design. And everybody thinks that the 318 and the 420 frame is, fantastic. And that garden tractors nowadays, at least that is the common trend, not everybody. The garden tractors nowadays just they don't have the frame that they had way back when. And hopefully this video gives you some real world examples of why I have my opinion of, a modern day garden tractor is probably just as good as a garden tractor from the 1960s, the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. Because we won't explore the 60s because I don't think that's necessarily a fair comparison. So we have a 1980, I can't remember, I think this was an 85 318. This was an 87 or 88 420. You can tell that these frames are substantial. Basically, and what I've done is I've already used a caliper to measure the frame thickness, and I figured I would do it in a unified location. The frame thickness right here is about 0.2 inches. Well, I think it's 0.19, something like that, as close as I can get it with the electronic caliper. And so, this frame in and of itself just looks big, beefy. It relies on a couple things to keep it nice and stiff. Obviously, we have the this thing, rock shaft. There you go. Glad I'm on my game today. So we have a rock shaft, and then at the same time we have this center, the steering frame and everything. We have some supports on the steering frame. So that's all metal, and then we have a couple of shafts for the brakes and everything. That's going to give it some substantial stiffening capabilities. And we have to remember we also have the transaxle in there and the differential. That's going to give it it's going to make it stiff as well. And then on the Onan powered machines, you had a base for the engine. On the later machines, you had a cutout for the starter, right about where my finger's at, right in there. Because you shifted from that Bendix style to that solenoid shift starter, you had some changes there. And overall, just a nice beefy frame. Engine sits down in it. There's not a whole lot of flex. Same thing with the 420. The 420 frame, from the back frame from about here back, is pretty similar to the 318. It does sit up a little bit higher than the fender pan sits up a little bit higher, so you've got some more reinforcements right there with the steering control tower. And instead of coming down to the frame, you've got that bar running down, and that was actually modified several times during the run of the 420. From what I remember from parts diagrams. The big changes in the 400 series from the 300 series is this width of the front. Basically comes out 1 inch on either side, so it's 2 inches wider in the front compared to the 318 frame. Now we're going to go ahead and step into a 425 frame. So I believe this was a 1999 425, or it may have been a 2004 445. I can't really remember. It's been sitting around here for quite a while, and if you measure the frame thickness in the same spot, the thickness is about the same compared to the 420 and the 318 frame. Now obviously there are some changes regarding how the engine sits in there and the engine mounts, but honestly I've never, and if somebody wants to correct me, I have never really heard of many people having frame problems with a 425, 445, or 455, just not a common problem. So overall, I mean, this frame is just as capable as the 318 and the 420 frames. Now, I realize that we can measure thickness in different locations, and I figured that was about the most uniform on all of them in terms of the main frame. And then right here we have an X748 frame. Now, ironically enough, the reason that it is in parts, because it doesn't make much sense to port out a good X748, is the reason it's in part. Is because it was an insurance claim supposedly rolled down the hill and busted the frame out, which you can see right back there. Which I don't think any of these machines would survive such a thing, and so we'll talk about that here in just a second. Now, one of the things that you're going to see with this X748 frame is it does look like it has less metal, particularly the fact that it's open like the 425 frame, so it doesn't have that good thick engine mount in the middle. But at the same time, what they did is they actually went ahead and added stiffening braces in the X748 frame. At the same time, you can clearly tell that the frame design has changed quite a bit in terms of, the way the frame rails are made, punch outs and stuff like that. I mean, clearly this frame is much more computer controlled, they say, compared to these two frames that were most likely done on very, very early computers, if not they were done on paper for their initial design. One of the big things with this frame, it is, based on my caliper, it is slightly thinner. Slightly. Basically, I get 0.18 inches thick on this frame compared to about the 0.19 something inches on this frame. So, in terms of thickness, yes, there's a little bit of a difference, but it doesn't seem to be that much of a difference. Now, something I'm going to say, and this is based on my experience, clearly, I hopefully, if you've watched my videos, I have a decent amount of experience tearing these machines apart and observing everything that goes into making these garden tractors. And probably of these four frames, the ones that I have seen the most with the most problems are going to be the 420s and 430s. I have parted out more 420s and 430s with bad frames than I have any other machine. And in fact, the reason that this one was parted out is because back here, the differential took out the ear on the frame. I've also parted out two 430s that cracked right here at one of them cracked right here and the other cracked on the other side. And so, take my experience with a grain of salt, but that has been my experience with these frames. I have had more trouble out of the 420, 430 frames than I have any other type machine. Now, one thing that I will say that people say a lot is the X748 frame or the X7 frame does flex, and I will vouch that it does flex considerably more than any of the other frames, because I can feel it when I'm running the 45 loader on my X748 there. I can feel the frame flex. So I know that the frame does flex on the newer X series. However, I have seen very, very few frame failures. Just, observation over the years that I've done this, not very many people have reported frame failures. There's a couple instances of people having their frames replaced because they weren't welded properly. And then a lot of people have replaced radiators due to a suspected flexing frame. However, if you look at how the radiator is installed in the machine, a flexing frame should not directly cause a radiator leak. At least not that I have ever been able to figure out. how it does, because the radiator is actually isolated in these machines fairly well from the rest of the frame. And I figured, based on my use, which my X748 has over 700 hours on it, it's a 2007, and I mean, I use it extensively for loader work. I mean, I push it quite hard for loader work. I mean, it works. And if that's a machine that's going to have a busted radiator, that's going to be the machine right there in terms of flexing. It goes in and out of ditches. It does loader work. It does lots of ground engaging work. It is constantly ballasted in some form or fashion. So I mean, if I was going to find a machine to fail, it would be that machine right there. I would cause it to fail at some point in time. Like I said, I mean, it doesn't have over 1,000 hours on it, but I mean, that is something to consider. So hopefully, you take, somebody learned something from this in terms of frames. When it comes to garden tractors, or I guess you can call them super garden tractors, I don't necessarily see a concern with frames. Now, obviously, as you get into the X3s, the X5s, and the smaller D series, there's going to be cost-cutting measures in those frames. But I don't see how a super garden tractor like the X7 frame can be. I don't think I can talk ill about that frame right there if I'm not going to talk ill about the 420 frame right here. I thought I had a 430 frame out here, but I can't find it in maybe I got rid of it. The reason I have these out is they're actually going to go to scrap here pretty soon. I just don't, they've been sitting around here for well over a year and a half. So it's time for them to go. But I figured I would do this video, hopefully answer some of those questions. If you do have questions, comments, I am always open to listening to others' opinions. Just leave them below in the comments. Thanks for watching.